Hey guys, and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Necromancer in Season 4. With the meta builds covered to death, I'm now bouncing around the off-meta options, trying some different builds to see how they're doing and how they're working, with a basic setup, that's not optimal, but provides me a good insight into how it's really working. Today though, we're checking out the pretty impressive Bone Spirit showings, after a crazy player by the name of King Pig cleared a tier 120 with one of these, which is surprisingly high for off-meta. As it turns out, there's some serious power to the Bone Spirit build, all thanks to a combination of vulnerability, crit, and even overpower. This is thanks to a clever combination of something like this, the Banished Lord's Talisman. Basically means after you spend a certain amount of resource, you get to guarantee the next overpower, and that overpower deals a lot more damage. If you synergize that with a very underused item, the Blood Moon Breaches, you have this way to curse enemies using your minions, causing those enemies to take significantly more overpower damage. Previously, this was completely unused, but now minions can work into a normal build in a more casual way. You can see how I've just got skeletal warriors here. We're able to run something like that properly, finally. So the result is some impressive, satisfying burst that does require a good amount of thought and setup. But when it does hit, it's comparable to the meta options, and that's seriously impressive. However, there is a huge but here, and a very clear reason as to why this isn't meta. It's inconsistent, where you create windows of vulnerability for yourself, and if it's not hitting, it can be a bit of a death sentence, because your Bone Spirit must hit hard. So that needs to be timed correctly with 100% crit chance, as much crit damage as possible, with all the right buffs aligned at the same time. The result of the stars aligning is definitely impressive, but because it needs all that stuff to align, it requires a bit of delayed timing, a lot of awareness. In your normal gameplay of the different meta builds, say the main minion builds really, you can just brain off and let things go and it'll work well. Then intentionally stack buffs at the right time against a boss when you need to. Bone Spirit requires that awareness the whole way, which is a real negative. It's far from brain off. I found the mob clear pretty fun and effective though. That can be brain off. All you're really doing is stacking up the enemies with a blood mist, using the corpses to pull everyone in, and then smashing them with really powerful one, maybe two Bone Spirits back to back. Watching that pop for millions, hundreds of millions of damage. There's definitely potential for a good billion hit with this setup. This kind of output was shown by King Pig in those higher tiers. Careful movement, damage stacking for big bursts at the right time, blasting targets. But no matter what way you swing it, the boss health in pits becomes a serious problem quickly. Whatever I did against bosses, I could have a few 100 million in a hit, but I'd still be left with long windows of lacking damage that basically didn't make up for it. The setup takes time to generate enough corpses to prep the next overpower, all while avoiding the usual mechanics, by the way. It's not just me though. Even the incredible tier 120 situation, that was over 5 minutes on just the boss alone. Meanwhile, the top Necromancer builds, I'll have it in 30 seconds or less, 10 tiers higher than that. So it's a massive gap in the output and the skill required. Still, that concept could appeal to you compared to mindless minion gameplay that we've been used to, and it definitely feels amazing when it hits. In the future, I'd like to see more consistency in the output for a build like this. We already have to give so much, say 100% of your essence, just to even use a Bone Spirit. The fact it has a cooldown at the same time, I just don't like. Still, it's very unique and very different from the current meta. So let's talk about the build setup if you want to try it. For the Book of the Dead though, we are just running the warriors. We run them with defenders under upgrade 2 so that they take way less damage, meaning they're basically always alive. This is important because we're running Blood Moon Breaches, so we want these to be constantly applying their curse to make our overpower consistently hit hard. For the mages, we sacrifice the bone to further power our overpowered damage, and with the golem, it's Iron Golem to massively increase our crit strike damage too. It's been ages since I've been sacrificing my minions. Kind of a weird thing to think about. Next we have the skill tree. We have 2 points anywhere. It doesn't matter just to progress. We max out Unliving Energy for more max essence. We actually increase our damage thanks to our key passive. Ossified Essence increases the damage you deal for each point of essence you have above 50. We'll also want Imperfectly Balanced because Bone Spirit is actually a core skill. Even though it's not in the core skill circle, when we scroll down to Bone Spirit, you can see that it's officially considered Macabre, Bone, and Core. We also pick up Hued Flesh here because we do need to be generating corpses to actually expend. On the next tree, we put 1 point into Blood Mist and take that to Ghastly. Again, we need a guaranteed way to generate corpses. We're not generating a ton in this build, so I use Blood Mist to generate corpses quite a lot actually. I've got 2 points in Spiked Armor just to get me over the armor cap. You could run more or less depending on whether you're at the armor cap or not. Then we have 1 point into Grim Harvest so we can get to Fueled by Death, giving us a nice damage bonus as we pop the Skeletal Priests. On the next tree, we have 1 point to Crepify all the way to Abhorrent to help CDR. We'll be cursing everything with that, so of course we want Amplified Damage. Death's Embrace for the close damage. You generally want to play close to enemies with this build. We take a point into Corpse Tendrils and bring that to Blade for the vulnerable. And then of course we have Bone Spirit, which we max out completely. I've got 16 levels into this to maximize the damage it's dealing. And we take it to Dreadful to help with essence generation after we're using our Bone Spirits. We fully commit to all of our bone passives to increase the damage and general CDR and so on. On the ultimate tree, of course, we take Bone Storm to its maximum and 3 points into Inspiring Leader. While you're healthy, you get this critical strike chance. An extra 12% is really nice to have. And then obviously our key passive is Ossified Essence. But that brings us to the Paragon. On the first board, we're running Control. This is a major damage increase to any crowd control enemy. That could even be the slow of Decrepify, not just the hard stuns. This helps your mob clear become way more consistent. So we activate that with 40 intelligence and pick up nodes around that for extra damage and resistance to all elements, as well as more max life. That brings us to our second board though, which is of course Bone Graft for any bone build. For the glyph on this board though, it's Essence, giving us way more crit strike damage, of course. Here we can pick up a good amount of dexterity as well and get some bonus to resistance to all elements. So that's how I spend my points there, making sure to come to Invigorate and picking up all the nodes around that and coming up to the right to grab the legendary node. Here we can extend to another board, which is Flesh Eater, providing us with a major damage increase after consuming 5 corpses. On this board we have Corporeal. This is a major buff because it gives an extra bonus to magic nodes. Extra damage to elites and extra resistances is very nice. In general though, we get more physical damage, and yeah, Bone Spirit is a physical damage ability. So that's where we spend our points there. Now let's come to our left. As we're exiting the board, you can come up here to Tenacity to get more health and even more armor, which is well worth doing if you're going to push high pits. This brings us to the left though, where we have Scent of Death for the major damage reduction that provides. Here we're trying to be pretty efficient just to get to another board, so we come straight through, where we actually do run Dominate. When you overpower an enemy, all damage they take from you and your minions is increased by 12% times. So the follow-up Bone Spirit after the first one is also pretty damn good because of this. We can't commit too much willpower to this, but it's also a little bit more overpower damage in a raw way, but we pretty much come straight shot through this board. So our next board, this is Bloodbath, which is not just a dump board now, because yes, it's going to increase your overpower damage. So we're definitely going to want that. I rotate it so I can also path through Powerhouse. Even more overpower damage will be found here. The glyph we come up to though is Dead Razor. Whenever your minions deal damage to an enemy, that takes up to 15% more times damage. So as our skeletons are consistently attacking the boss or a target, it's stacking up another damage bonus. On that one, we just need 40 intelligence to get it active, and this is how I achieved that. But there's actually one more board we need to talk about, another dump board, down at the bottom right below Flesh Eater. This is where we spend the minimum amount of points to actually get to another board, so that's why we do it down here. It's Blood begets Blood as a dump board. It works as a good intelligence board, and you're going to get more overpowered damage here. If you put Amplify here, that gives a bonus to magic nodes, and the magic nodes here are overpowered damage ones. So it's pretty significant. We want to be pretty minimal about this though, coming straight down and getting to the glyph, getting Amplify activated, and picking up the 2 rare nodes to achieve that. But yeah, that's the Paragon board. A little bit all over the place, but with some pretty impactful overpower increases through the Paragon. This brings us to the gear section, where this is where I've got most of the unfinished state of the build, but the aspects and everything that I'm aiming for, I can talk to you about. Starting with the helmet. I'm running Harlequin Crest because this is giving you +4 ranks to all skills. That means an extra 4 levels to Bone Spirit, which is pretty insane. If you do not have this uber unique though, Shielding Storm on a helmet is definitely your best alternative, but the 20% raw, flat, constant damage reduction, as well as cooldown reduction, resource gen, is very valuable. So I very much like this helmet in the build. For the chest piece, we get to run Hardened Bones. Because we are running just these warriors, we are getting this 20% damage reduction. On the offensive slot of the gloves, we're running Ossified Essence or Serration, further enhancing our key passive. As I've shown, my legs are Blood Moon Breaches to curse enemies and increase our overpower damage. On the boots, we go for Dominion. This gives us 2 extra warriors, which in turn means we're getting more curses out, as well as stacking up Dead Razor and the Paragon even better. For the one-hand weapon, I'm just running a wand, and I'm running Swelling Curse. This gives us a flat 25% extra critical strike chance on Bone Spirit specifically. Further, our max essence is increased by 2 for each enemy hit for 15 seconds. So in AoE mob clear, this massively boosts the next Bone Spirit by increasing the max essence. For the amulet, of course, it's Banished Lords, that's a non-negotiable. And for the rings, it's also similar. We get to run Torment, critical strikes with bone skills are massively improving our essence gen. That's how we're able to restore for another Bone Spirit follow-up pretty consistently. And on the second ring, we have Requiem, really underused normally. You gain up to 7 maximum essence per active minion. So the more minions we have, the more essence we get, and so that's why Dominion, again, is so valuable. The higher our max essence when we're using Bone Spirit, the harder it hits. Lastly, for offhand focus, we have Grasping Veins, of course, for the big crit strike chance and critical strike damage. For the affixes then, defensively, it's just your usual stuff. Intel, max life, and armor to get you to the cap. Pretty much have to have that on the chest piece in this case, since we're running a unique and uber unique on the other two defensive slots. On the offensive slot gloves, we have crit strike chance and overpowered damage, and very important, levels to your core skills. The more we have of that, the higher our Bone Spirit levels will be. On the boots, it's also very important that you have levels to Bone Spirit, where I even have a greater affix on that. Again, more levels to Bone Spirit, more Bone Spirit damage. On the wand, I've got Intel max life and overpower damage, and on the focus, we have crit strike chance, intel, and resource cost reduction. For the rings, it's crit strike chance, damage, and max life, or crit strike chance, damage, and intelligence. But tempering's much more important. Let's talk about that. We try to increase the corpse tendril size to make that more consistent. 2 of these is ideal, so I have it on my chest piece and on my gloves. Defensively, I also have a bit more total armor, again to just get me over the cap. If you're at the cap or above, you won't need more, so I'd go for max life in that case. On the offensive gloves, we're looking for Bone Spirit damage, which I could not get for the life of me. I ended up with bone damage, but I do have Bone Spirit damage and everything else, like my rings. On the boots, we have movement speed and cursed duration just to get some benefit, but you could go for decrepify size here as well. But more importantly, the offensive slots. We have Bone Spirit explosion size, which is fine. You could also go for the Bone Storm extend, so how long it actually lasts, but mainly it's about the Bone Spirit damage increase. We want as much of that as we can get, so we have it on our wand and we have it on our rings as well. Further on our rings, we have Macabre skills restore primary resource. Again, Bone Spirit is also a Macabre skill, so as we use it, it's also restoring a bunch of essence. We need an infinite supply, so we're able to always use it on cooldown. So we have that on both of the rings, Bone Spirit damage, Macabre skill restore. Finally, on the focus, we have more Bone Spirit damage and Bone Spirit explosion size. For Masterworking, there's just kind of a couple priorities. You want to increase the Bone Spirit damage, you want to increase the levels of Bone Spirit, so that could be through core skills or just directly, and you want to improve your crit strike damage, overpowered damage as raw output. We shouldn't be struggling with crit strike chance. Standing here, I've got 40% from what's on my gear. I get an extra 25% of my Bone Spirit. I get more from my Bone Storm, pushing us to the 100% either way. For gems, it's extra health in all your defensives, and then we also work in overpowered damage in the weapons, and then it's what you actually need personally in the jewelry. Once you're at max resistances, I'd go for armor gems, and then maybe you can leave spiked thorns out of the skill tree, saving you some points. But that brings us to our conclusion on this quick off-meta build overview. Bone Spirit can hit hard, seriously hard, competitively so. Naturally, in my case, this forced together basic look at a build, it's still landing hundreds of millions of damage per use. If we were optimal about this, put in a few days of real commitment, I think the output would be significantly improved. The result of that concept was shown in that tier 120 clear. It's obviously possible, but nothing's going to distract from the simple fact that this damage is inconsistent. It can't achieve that max stacked output every Bone Spirit press, just in the same way that you can't make a golem or mage build always smash at its peak. The difference though is the average damage, and that's where it loses the edge. Where the golem keeps smashing or the mage style build is just even stronger by comparison in consistency, Bone Spirit falls off a cliff. And worse, when you do it wrong, you end up with much less essence generation for a little while, as well as that longer Bone Spirit cooldown, like you're left without a paddle in deep water. So while the highs are competitive, the lows are way worse, and the average overall is simply not meta competitive with the full minion builds. Still, it's decent big picture, heavily rewarding committed builds with the required stats to really get it to work. I'm missing a lot of essence gen here, even max essence to make it hit even harder, and I can feel it. There's clearly not one that you can casually jump into, not as easily. I hope this little overview could give you the relevant context to see how Bone Spirit's doing in Season 4 though. Hopefully it receives some attention in Season 5 because it's not that far behind. Could be really good. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thank you for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.